Picture this. You're sitting in your living room, right? You're having a completely normal conversation with your partner. But then it suddenly takes a difficult turn. The air gets thick with tension, you ask a direct question, and then total silence. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really painful and honestly widely misunderstood reality that happens behind closed doors in almost every relationship. We're talking about the silent treatment during conflicts. It's this incredibly frustrating dynamic that leaves both people feeling completely isolated. The person talking feels totally ignored, and the person who goes quiet, well, they feel trapped. But as we're going to see today, there is some profound, undeniable science behind this quiet reaction. I'm fine. You've probably heard these two exact words, or let's be honest, maybe you've even said them yourself. Usually, this little two-word phrase drops right in the middle of a super tense moment when someone is deeply hurt. But here's the catch. When a partner drops those two words, the conflict doesn't actually end. It just goes completely underground. They utterly refuse to argue. It's like they pull up a metaphorical drawbridge and just shut down. Their face goes blank, their body gets stiff, and the whole conversation hits an absolute impenetrable brick wall. But here is the dramatic irony of that exact moment, and the hidden translation of what those words truly mean inside the head of the person shutting down. What they're actually screaming internally is, "Please, just leave me alone." Now, out of pure habit, we tend to label this behavior negatively, don't we? I mean, why do we instantly assume they're just being stubborn or giving us the cold shoulder? We think, oh, they're avoiding the issue, or they're actively choosing to punish me with the silent treatment. Or maybe we even think they just aren't brave enough to face their own emotions. Well, today we are going to look at the actual science of what is happening right under the surface. And let me tell you, it changes absolutely everything. So here is our roadmap for This Explainer. We're going to navigate straight from frustration to real scientific understanding, and finally, to some actionable reconnection. We'll be covering 1. The misunderstood silence. 2. The biology of freezing. 3. 3 roots of silence. 4. The storm inside. And finally, 5. How to reconnect. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Section 1, the misunderstood silence, and why it's absolutely not a rational choice. Look, if we're really going to understand someone who goes quiet, we have to completely let go of the biggest misconception out there. And that's the idea that speaking up or staying silent is some kind of rational choice. Modern psychology and neuroscience, they tell us an entirely different story. This silence is not a calculated move. It's definitely not a lack of bravery. Just like you don't consciously choose to sweat when you're hot or shiver when you're cold, this freeze response is a totally involuntary biological reaction. It's strictly governed by the autonomic nervous system. When a person is faced with a severe threat of emotional pain or intense conflict, they aren't choosing to ignore you. Their body has literally grabbed the steering wheel. Which brings us right to Section 2, the biology of freezing and the fascinating polyvagal theory. We're going to look at exactly how our bodies handle these emotional threats using Dr. Stephen Porges' highly regarded polyvagal theory. Basically, the nervous system responds to stress on 3 distinct levels. Level 1 is social engagement. Picture yourselves calmly making dinner, and you're able to just look at your partner and say, "Hey, what you just said hurt me." You feel safe enough to actually use language. But if the stress rises, we drop right into level 2, fight or flight. Your heart races, adrenaline spikes, voices escalate, maybe you argue or storm out of the room. But what happens when that emotional pain reaches an unbearable, totally overwhelming level? Well, the body suddenly plummets into level 3, dorsal vagal shutdown. This is where the sudden drop happens and everything just goes completely quiet. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding this dorsal vagal shutdown. It is the body's ultimate safety freeze mechanism. Think of your partner's body like a really complex electronic device that suddenly gets hit with a massive power surge. To keep the whole system from literally burning out and short-circuiting, a built-in safety mechanism automatically shuts everything down. The switch literally flips off physiologically. And you can actually measure this. Their heart rate drops, their breathing becomes super shallow, their muscles tense up, and their conscious logic becomes completely inaccessible. They are literally frozen in survival mode. Now, think about what is happening inside the brain during this freeze state, because it's wild. The prefrontal cortex, the advanced part of the brain that handles logic, reasoning, and language, temporarily disconnects from the amygdala, which is basically our emotional fire alarm. Language literally gets locked away behind a physiological vault. So even if there are thousands of desperate thoughts screaming inside their head, they physically can't find the voice to turn those thoughts into words. That biological bridge between feeling and speaking, it's totally collapsed. Demanding they speak in this state is honestly like asking someone with a broken leg to sprint a marathon. It just isn't physically possible in that exact moment. But that naturally begs the question for Section 3, the roots of silence. Why do people freeze in the first place? I mean, we know it's biological, but why do some people default to this freeze state while others just start yelling? It's incredibly important to realize that this is not a personality flaw. It is a deeply ingrained survival mechanism, and there are generally 3 core causes for it. First up, childhood wounds. Imagine a child who, every single time they express sadness or anger, is told to stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Their developing brain quickly learns a really tragic lesson. Vulnerability equals danger. So they just teach themselves to swallow their tears to stay safe. Second is the shadow of toxic relationships. If someone had a past partner who constantly twisted their words or gaslit them or used their vulnerabilities as a weapon, well, they learn pretty quickly that speaking only makes things worse. Silence becomes their only reliable armor. And third, sometimes it's just simply their natural brain wiring. And that natural brain wiring usually comes down to our fundamental communication styles. We essentially fall into 2 camps here. External processors, they need to talk things out to understand what they're feeling. They think out loud, finding their truth through the actual conversation. But internal processors, they work the exact opposite way. They have to sort everything internally before they can even attempt to speak a single word. For a sensitive internal processor, their brain is like an old computer that's just been forced to open 100 complex browser tabs all at once during a really loud, fast-paced argument. It instantly overloads. The internal fan starts spinning, the screen freezes, and they need a literal loading screen, a total pause from all external input just to organize the chaos going on in their mind. All right, let's move to Section 4, the storm inside. We need to discover why silence is never actually empty. We're going to look at 3 psychological truths unfolding right beneath that quiet, still exterior. Because while they might look completely calm and detached on the outside, the first truth is that they are experiencing a massive overactivation of the default mode network, or the DMN, in the brain. This is the complex system that handles self-reflection and our internal narrative. So in that deep, frozen silence, their mind is actually deafeningly loud. Thousands of frantic questions are just colliding all at once. Was it my fault? What did I say wrong? What did they actually mean by that comment? If I speak right now, is it just going to make everything worse? They aren't avoiding the situation at all. They are desperately trapped inside this chaotic analytical maze, searching for the exact right words, but finding absolutely no clear way out. The second truth relates to this brilliant concept coined by Dr. Dan Siegel. It's called the window of tolerance. We all have one. It's that psychological sweet spot where we can function normally, process information, and handle stress without totally losing our cool. But when they are deeply hurt, the silent partner is pushed completely outside of it. And they have this sharp, terrifying awareness that if they actually open their mouth in this state of total emotional overload, what comes out won't be constructive or honest. It'll be flying verbal bullets that could leave permanent, unhealable scars on the person they love. So their silence is actually a really heavy shield, raised to protect the relationship from their own overwhelmed reactions. Which leads us to the third truth, and honestly, the real tragedy of this entire dynamic. When we don't understand this biology, we push, we demand answers. But the more a partner pushes for a response, the deeper the nervous system freezes. Pushing a silent person to speak is like forcing a drowning person to sing. It is biologically impossible. And worse than that, it confirms their deepest underlying fears, that their intense emotions are a burden, that they aren't safe. And quietly, almost invisibly, it completely erodes the trust between you. So how do we actually break this cycle? That brings us to our final section, how to reconnect, using presence without demands. Let's look at some actionable strategies based on understanding all this biology. Okay, if you are the vocal partner, you've got to try shifting your approach completely. Instead of demanding an immediate answer, offer them safety. Try saying something like, I can see you're overwhelmed. I respect that. I'll be in the living room. Whenever you're ready, I'm here to listen without judgment. This deliberate step back, it is absolutely not abandonment. What it does is safely diffuse their freeze response. When that immense pressure to respond immediately disappears, their defensive guard naturally lowers. Slowly, blood flow gradually returns to the prefrontal cortex and those language centers of the brain. You are giving them the exact biological space they need to recover. Now, on the flip side, if you are the partner who naturally goes quiet, you need to build what psychologists call a safe exit. Instead of accidentally putting up an impenetrable wall that leaves your partner feeling super abandoned, communicate your need for space. Try saying, my mind feels stuck right now.
I need about 30 minutes alone, but I promise I'll come back and talk to you. This is an incredibly empowering bridge. It gives your brain the literal loading time it desperately needs to defrost your nervous system and process those 100 open tabs while completely reassuring your loved one that they are safe, the relationship is secure, and you definitely aren't leaving them behind.
I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. Are we mistaking a deep, heavily filtered soul for a broken one just because their silence is louder than words? Remember, people who go quiet are not uncaring. Not at all. When they finally do speak, their words aren't impulsive, knee-jerk reactions. They're careful conclusions that have been refined through hundreds of internal filters of honesty and compassion. Silence isn't a rejection. It is a biological response, a profound marker of emotional integrity, and ultimately, it's an invitation to a much deeper understanding of the people we love. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.